A merchant's wife knew she was going to die the moment she saw the sharpened stake being dragged through the mud toward the crossroads. It wasn't the blood already coating the wood that told her this, or the flies gathering in anticipation, or even the screams of the man currently being hoisted onto another stake 30 feet away. No, what told her was the careful, almost bored expression on the face of the soldier holding the rope around her wrists. He'd done this before, many times, and the worst part? He was humming some folk tune about harvesting wheat, because to him this was just another Tuesday in Wallachia, another body to mount on another stake, another warning to the Ottoman Empire that Vlad Dracula did not negotiate, did not compromise, and absolutely did not give a single damn about the rules of civilized warfare. The woman had made the fatal mistake of selling bread to an Ottoman scouting party 3 days prior. Just bread. Not information, not weapons, not shelter. Bread. But in the calculus of terror that governed the Danubian frontier in 1462, bread was treason, and treason required an example that would make grown men weep and hardened soldiers reconsider their career choices. Let us be clear about something that most sanitized history books conveniently gloss over. Impalement wasn't designed to kill you quickly. That would defeat the entire purpose. No, the craftsmen of death in Vlad's employ had perfected a technique that could keep a human being alive and conscious for hours, sometimes days, depending on how much entertainment value they wanted to extract from the situation. The stake was rounded at the tip, not sharp, and it was carefully oiled to prevent, shall we say, excessive internal damage that might cause rapid bleeding out. The goal was to have gravity do most of the work, slowly, inexorably, while every nerve ending in your body screamed in a harmony of agony that would make the devil himself take notes. And women? Oh, Vlad had a special consideration for women. Not chivalry, mind you, never chivalry, but a calculated understanding that the sight of women on stakes, their bodies displayed at crossroads or traders, and soldiers and peasants would pass, created a very specific type of psychological devastation that went beyond mere military deterrence. It whispered to every Ottoman commander, "Your supply lines aren't safe. Your foragers will die screaming, and the people you trying to conquer would rather see their own mothers impaled than cooperate with you." The archaeological record, for those who enjoy their history with a side of existential dread, confirms this wasn't just propaganda. Excavations at medieval crossroads near fortifications have uncovered bone fragments showing trauma patterns inconsistent with battle wounds. These weren't soldiers who died with swords in their hands. These were people who died slowly, vertically, while the world continued around them. Merchants counted coins. Carts rolled past. Life went on while human bodies drained into the mud, transforming roads into galleries of meat and message. Contemporary witnesses including Greek historian Laonikos Chalkokondals and various Venetian diplomats whose dispatches to the Senate in 1462 read like horror novellas documented forests of stakes, thousands of bodies, arranged in geometric patterns, and necropolis of the deliberately tormented that stretched for miles. One Venetian correspondent described approaching a fortress and seeing what he initially thought were trees, only to realize with dawning horror that the vertical shapes were human beings at various stages of death and decay, some still moving, some already colonized by crows. But the genius, if we can use that word without vomiting, of Vlad's approach was its targeting. This wasn't random violence. Every body on a stake was a message in a larger conversation. Ottoman supply lines depended on local cooperation, on peasants who would sell food, on guides who knew the terrain, on women who ran the market stalls and managed the households that kept frontier towns functioning. So Vlad made cooperation impossible by making the price of cooperation so spectacularly gruesome that even thinking about selling an egg to a Turkish soldier meant imagining your intestines slowly perforating on a wooden spike while your neighbors walked past, pretending not to hear your screams. The strategy worked. Ottoman foraging parties started returning to camp empty-handed, reporting that entire villages had fled into the forests, that market towns were abandoned, that the women who usually could be bought or coerced into providing supplies had vanished like ghosts, taking their daughters with them because everyone knew that daughters were particularly valuable in the new economy of terror that Vlad had created. And let's talk about that economy, because it gets worse. As the conflict escalated through 1462 and 1463, something remarkable happened. A ransom market emerged. Women captured during raids weren't always impaled immediately. Sometimes they were held, paraded before fortifications to force surrenders, used in negotiations, traded back to families for gold that would fund more military operations. Notarial records from Transylvanian towns list specific ransom payments, names, and sums. Widows bankrupting themselves to retrieve daughters, fathers selling land to buy back wives. The Ottomans, never ones to miss a profitable opportunity, began systematically capturing women during their retaliatory raids, creating a bidding war of human misery where both sides competed to see who could weaponize civilian suffering more effectively. Venetian merchants, those reliable chroniclers of anything that affected commerce, noted in their diaries that market traffic in frontier zones dropped by half in 1463 because no one wanted to risk travel when the roads were lined with bodies and the forests were full of raiders looking for bargaining chips with breasts. The really disturbing part, the detail that makes you want to scrub your brain with bleach, is how casual it all became. Court documents from Brasov and Cebu show women being tried and executed for collaboration with stunning bureaucratic efficiency. The charges were often absurd: sheltering a wounded Ottoman soldier, failing to report suspicious travelers, being related to someone who might have sold grain to the enemy. The trials, such as they were, became theater, public performances where the outcome was predetermined, and the point was to remind everyone watching that mercy was a luxury no one could afford. Some women were impaled in market squares as crowds gathered, not out of bloodlust, but because attendance was essentially mandatory. If you didn't show up to watch, you might be suspected of sympathy for the condemned, and sympathy was just collaboration with extra steps. Archaeological excavations of these market squares have found burnt layers from the 1460s, scattered domestic ceramics, and in one particularly grim discovery, the remains of a woman buried in a refuse pit rather than consecrated ground or skeleton, showing perimortem trauma consistent with impalement and her age. Estimated at somewhere between 16 and 20 years old, she was someone's daughter. Someone paid for her to be thrown in a garbage heap. The Ottoman response was, predictably, to do exactly the same thing back. Men, too, never a man to lose an arms race in atrocity, authorized punitive raids into Wallachia with explicit orders to capture civilians, burn infrastructure, and create his own galleries of suffering. Ottoman campaign records, preserved in imperial archives, describe sacking villages and taking women as labor and food sources, a phrase that means exactly what you think it means and worse. Eyewitness accounts from Venetian merchants describe Ottoman columns returning with trains of captives, women and children roped together, being force-marched south where they disappear into the resettlement programs that Ottoman administrators used to repopulate devastated areas. Some of these women ended up in household registers, recorded with their ages and skills, reduced to entries in a ledger of human capital. Others simply vanished, their fates becoming part of the statistical noise of frontier warfare, numbers that maybe meant something to a bureaucrat in Constantinople, but meant everything to the families who would never see them again. Parish registers from Transylvanian churches in the years following 1463 make for genuinely depressing reading. They list missing brides, disrupted marriages, orphaned children, and the particularly heartbreaking category of fate unknown next to names of women who disappeared during raids. Estate inventories show families financially destroyed by ransom payments, selling everything to retrieve a mother or sister, only to find that the asking price had doubled by the time they raised the gold. Some families went into debt for generations. The social fabric of frontier communities didn't just tear, it shredded into confetti. Marriage networks that had connected towns and villages for centuries collapsed because no one knew who was alive, who was captured, who had been impaled on a road somewhere as a message in a war they hadn't asked to be part of. Archaeological evidence supports this disruption. Dwelling excavations show sudden shifts from modest luxury items to purely utilitarian goods, the material trace of households impoverished by ransom or displacement. Families eating from wooden bowls instead of ceramics, because they desold everything valuable to retrieve a daughter who came back traumatized and broken. The psychological warfare extended beyond the physical. Chronicles from multiple sources describe incidents where captured women were deliberately placed at the front of Ottoman siege lines, forcing Wallachian defenders to choose between firing on their own people or holding fire and risking being overrun. In one documented case from 1464, a fortress garrison surrendered after Ottoman forces paraded captured townswomen in front of the walls, some already showing signs of torture, others holding infants. The garrison commander, whose name is lost to history, but whose surrender is recorded in Hungarian. Military correspondents reportedly wept as he opened the gates, knowing that his career was over, but unable to watch the women be executed one by one until he complied. The Ottomans, having learned from Vlad, returned some of the women and executed others anyway, because the point wasn't mercy or negotiation. The point was to demonstrate that there were no rules anymore, no codes of conduct, no appeals to civilization that wouldn't be met with laughter and another body on a stake. By 1465, the frontier had become a laboratory of human suffering, where both sides experimented with new methods of maximizing terror per unit of violence. Women were at the center of this calculus, not because they were specifically targeted out of misogyny, though that certainly played a role, but because they were structural. They maintained households, raised children, managed the economic and social networks that kept communities functioning. Break the women, the logic went, and you break everything. So they were broken, systematically documented in notarial records and ransom lists and memorial. Inscriptions that still exist in churches across Transylvania, stone testaments to women whose names we know, but whose stories were reduced to a date, a sum of money, and the word lost. The consequence wasn't just individual tragedy. It was generational trauma, embedded into the DNA of frontier populations, creating a collective memory of vulnerability that would shape regional politics for centuries. And Vlad? He died in 1476, possibly in battle, possibly assassinated. The details are contested. But his legacy, his innovation in making human suffering into policy, into strategy, into something you could measure and deploy like any other military asset, that lived on, studied by generals and tyrants who learned that sometimes the most effective weapon is not a sword or a cannon, but a stake and the willingness to use it on anyone, including the women whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time with a body that could be turned into a message.